So if you're a fan of Hamilton, you are going to love Mexodus. This groundbreaking musical combines history with hip-hop to explore the untold stories of enslaved people on the Underground Railroad to Mexico. Brian Quijada and Nigel D. Robinson give tour de force performances while using live looping to create a musical in real time. Mexodus is now playing at Mosaic Theater on 8th Street Northeast through June 15th. Get tickets at mosaictheater.org. That's mosaictheater.org. Today on CityCast DC. So if you listened to our episode with Rich Masters from the Campaign to Recall Councilmember Charles Allen, you might have been wondering, well, what does Charles Allen have to say about all of this? So we spoke to Allen about the campaign to recall him and about his vision for the future of Ward 6. Hey, before we get to today's conversation, I have a favor to ask. CityCast is doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out a lot if you took it. Please take the survey at citycast.fm/survey. It's only 7 minutes long. That's citycast.fm/survey. Plus, survey takers will also be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and some CityCast swag. That's citycast.fm/survey. Even if you took it last year, we will be grateful if you took it again, since we cannot use last year's data anymore. Thanks so much. Today's Tuesday, May 21st. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about.
Hey, Councilmember, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Michael. Great to see you.
So I got to ask about the recall. There's never been a successful recall in D.C. before, but there is a pretty high-profile effort to recall you. And when you strip everything else away, what's going on is that they blame you for the spike in crime that we saw in D.C. You were the head of the council committee overseeing judiciary. Do you deserve that?
Well, Michael, I think we all see what this really is, and I know the voters and residents of Ward 6 see it for what it is. This is largely an effort from national outside forces that are trying to come in.
Can we not talk about where the forces are from for a second? Like, I want to talk about,
though? That's a pretty significant part of this.
Well, I think that the question of whether, like, crime is up, why it's up, are you to blame, is a lot more salient to a lot of people than the kind of inside and game of who is working on campaigns.
Well, if you want to talk about public safety, then let's make sure we talk about that, right? So 2023 saw one of the biggest increases in spikes in crime and concerns about public safety than the district has seen in a long time. In 2022, violent crime was actually going down. Here in 2024, violent crime is also going down. But 2023 saw a remarkable increase in homicides, in gun violence, in carjackings, and rightly, for a lot of people, it's front of mind. It is for me. So really, serious folks then say, let's talk about what our solutions are. What is not working? Because if you go look at other cities around the country, you are seeing very steep decreases in gun violence and homicides and improvements in public safety. So what's not happening in DC that we are seeing happen in other cities? Right now, we've got a 911 call center that's understaffed and is sending people to the wrong address. We have a crime lab that lost its accreditation that can't handle evidence to get to the prosecutors in the first place. We have a dozen vacancies in our courts, and we're waiting on the U.S. Senate to finally try to give us our judges so we can actually move cases forward. There's so many parts of our system that aren't working and aren't working well. We have one of the highest lack of prosecution, what we call a no papering rate from the United States Attorney's Office. All those factors really contribute to what we've seen, and let alone, you might remember there was a global pandemic and it wreaked havoc with the city and with a lot of the communities and the individuals who are already at risk of either being victims of harm or committing harm. And so you combine all those things together, and I think that's what you look at for 2023. Violent crime right now is down about 25% to date right now. That is progress, but I think that it's still unacceptably high, and I think everybody who is serious wants to be working on solutions to keep driving that down and get it back to where public safety is not the level of concern that people have right now, but it is a legitimate concern that people have.
So look at, when they target you, the argument is, in 2020, during the national protests, the council, led by you because of the committee, moved to pull back the police budget, reduce the number of police, turn off the spigot. crime, as you say, it went down a little bit in 2022. It went way up in 2023. So this is a couple years later, and then is now down again this year. Are you saying that the stuff that happened in 2020, the reforms that were passed, both budgetary and in terms of rules for policing, did not have anything to do with either the down or the up in the subsequent years?
There's nothing in our record, and there's nothing in my record, nothing in the council's record, nothing in the council's actions that would explain the spike that we saw. The sentencing laws, for example, haven't changed. So the sentencing for robbery, for carjacking, those have all remained the same over time. There's been no reducing of penalties. What I think we see is a lack of accountability for violence when it gets caused. When you have a crime lab that went down, basically not operational, could not be able to process DNA, fingerprints, gun forensic evidence. That led to a marked inability for prosecutors to be able to move cases through successfully in court. I'll give you one kind of very concrete example of what those delays look like as well. So you may remember last July, there was a Afghan interpreter who was a Uber and Lyft driver, and he was killed right around 10th and C Northeast. Horrible murder. Within a matter of days, MPD knew who their suspect was, and it was a young person. It took almost a year to be able to get the actual forensics evidence back because we have to go out to other states and other private labs because you do have to be able to get a warrant. You have to be able to say, I'm going to take this to court. They finally made an arrest. But what happens those intervening 9 months, right? A community feels like they're not seeing justice take place. You got a suspect who committed murder who's out loose for 9 months thinking he got away with it. And you have a family that's completely traumatized, not seeing where justice looks like. And then you have a larger community that says, where is the accountability for that? I don't see accountability happening. And so that's why the crime lab is so important. We have to have a crime lab that can be able to get this evidence. MPD is making arrests. Does it translate into accountability in the courtroom? It doesn't right now. And that's a myriad of factors, the crime lab being a big one.
We spoke to Rich Masters, one of the folks who was leading the charge trying to recall you. And, we started this conversation talking about not wanting to frame this as outside federal, national people meddling in DC's business. However, I was really struck talking to Rich with him talking about this as like a neighborhood issue. One of the things he kept saying was like, well, what's more home rule than local DC folks using their voice and saying like, hey, this person has caused XYZ problem in our neighborhood. So he really framed this as like folks who live in your neighborhood, in your community, saying that you have not served them and saying that you've made them feel less safe in their homes. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I understand if Mr. Masters is working overtime trying to convince you it's some type of neighborhood-driven effort, but it just simply isn't. Neighbors don't go create dark money super PACs. That's what we see right now is
in DC, don't they?
For a neighborhood issue? No, you don't. We don't see that, right? Look at where the funding is coming from. You're talking about a campaign that is funded by former Trump officials, by people who are excited to go bend the knee to Donald Trump for another term. I understand why he's trying so hard to convince you of that, but that's not what we actually see in reality. A neighborhood campaign isn't hiring more than 60 people from outside DC to come try to knock on doors to collect signatures. That's what we see. So it's pretty evident where this is coming from. It's part and parcel of what we've seen, right? Congress just tried to pass legislation preventing DC from even increasing criminal consequences because they're trying to meddle so much in statehood and their local affairs.
But look at a lot of these donors, even the Republicans, some of them live in DC, live on Capitol Hill, live in your district. I mean, so what if they have views that appall you when it comes to the White House? Shouldn't they get a vote and a say in DC if they live here?
They do, Michael. And guess what? We just had one. We had an election where I won with 94% of the vote. So now what they want to do is try to overturn an election. Absolutely. If you want the job, if you think you can do it better, if you want to do it different, put your name on the ballot. That's what we do with elections. We feel a certain kind of way about trying to go overturn an election, but we just had one where the voters of Ward 6 trusted me for another term with 94% of the vote. If somebody else wants to run for the job, go for it. I'll meet you up on the debate stage and let's talk about our ideas and our vision for our city. But we usually hold the integrity of elections pretty seriously.
I mean, it's a tough thing, I guess, in a recall because like you're the only one on the ballot. It's not a you or they just put you up.
Well, I think that's where you see the flaws kind of start to materialize, right? They're not offering you a solution. They're not offering you another candidate. They're not offering an idea of how to work on public safety or any other issue. They've even said it's not even about me, is we want to send the city a signal. That's kind of the language that they use. So if there's a candidate out there that wants the job, go for it. Get on the ballot. Let's have an election. Let's have a debate. That's what democracy is about. And I think that's why so many people are reacting so strongly and pushing back on any type of recall effort, because it is really an insult to an election that we just went. But this is why Planned Parenthood is standing with me, why the firefighters are standing with me, why labor unions are standing with me, while the realtors are standing with me. It's why the Sierra Club is standing with me. It's why the DC Democratic Party is standing with me, because they see this for what it is and they're pushing back really hard.
Let's be real. Lawsuits are not fun. But with Paulson and Nace, at least they're a little easier. Paulson and Nace is a DC law firm in every sense of the word. It was founded here in 1979. The two partners, Chris and Matt Nace, were both born here and are local leaders who care deeply about the DC community. Paulson and Nace handles medical malpractice, wrongful death, and other complex injury cases when someone has been hurt by the negligence of others. And they don't just settle every case. They'll go to court. They'll fight for you. Paulson and Nace has even been recognized as one of U.S. News' best law firms. So, if you have been hurt or have lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Paulson and Nace for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.paulsonandnace.com or call 202-463-1999. Let me ask a big picture question, because it seems to me, we've had this kind of roller coaster since 2020 in DC with pandemic, with what's happened with the economy, with the reforms, and with crime. And, I think it's really hard. I think anybody who's trying to assess blame, I'm certain it's the U.S. attorney's fault, or I'm certain it's Charles Allen's fault. I think that's a fool's game. But I have to say, I got a lot of friends who are not like Karens, who feel like as crime went up, they would express fear about carjackings and stuff like that. And for whatever reason, they felt like the response from officialdom was, there's something suspicious, you're sounding like a Fox TV person hyping up crime, etc. And they felt unheard in their own city. You were part of officialdom. There's plenty of others. Do you think that you guys made any mistakes in either communications or policy?
I mean, I've sat in so many living rooms, talked with so many neighbors that have either been victims of violence and crime themselves, know somebody that they love, or a neighbor down the block that has. I'm a victim of violence myself. I think that you have to be able to recognize the concerns that you're citing are 100% legitimate fears and concerns around rising crime and public safety. Those are real. And I think where people are frustrated about efforts like this is that it's playing on people's very real fears. So what I try to do is say, let's talk about what our solutions are and how do we focus on actually being able to help solve the problem and turn things around, because negating somebody's very real experience as a victim or survivor of crime is very dangerous, and it's not what we want or need out of leaders. And so that's my record, has been working with victims and survivors of crime, passing the district's strongest victim right legislation that we have ever had, being able to really focus on what victims and survivors of crime need, because that reality and that experience has to be respected in that. And I think that's something that the entire city has got to focus on and work on, because to your point, if you know folks that say, I don't feel like my city cared or didn't express that emotion, then that is a failure of the entire city. I know when I'm in those living rooms, when I'm meeting one-on-one with families that have lost someone or have experienced that violence, I share my own experiences, and you have to meet people with empathy about what that experience was and never, ever, ever negate that very real concern and fear that they've had.
Well, one thing I want to ask, Mike asked about if you feel that there was any mistakes or missteps in messaging or policy. I do feel like some people listening might say, well, hey, we did pass a law this year undoing some of the policies before. And I wonder, can you talk me through how we got to this place where we are changing policies around crime and sentencing if those are not missteps or mistakes?
I think that presumes that you somehow think that laws are static documents. They're always changing, right? I passed legislation as the judiciary chair to increase criminal consequences on gun crimes. increased criminal consequences for extended magazine clips, for prohibiting ghost guns, right? Those are the guns that come basically like 85% complete, then people complete them at home in their basements. That is something that we did not see. So we didn't have the laws on the books to be able to do that. So our laws are constantly changing and adapting and evolving. We started to see the trends coming. And so we started changing our laws to help hold accountable people that are going to use those weapons in violence, right? So the laws that we passed this year, many of them were actually part of laws we had already passed that Congress overturned. So many of the elements of Secure DC were part of our revised criminal code that we wanted to have passed that we had previously passed. So those weren't necessarily changes, but there were things like clarifications. So for example, we wanted to be able to work with the police department to clarify how it's interpreted if an officer has their hand brush across someone's chest or neck, right? It didn't change the fundamental law, which is we don't want you to choke someone to death. But what it does do is clarify, let's make sure it's very clear because we want officers to know what the rules are, how they can take their action, right? That's not a rollback. That's a clarification. It's making sure our laws meet what our needs are, but that's going to happen. We're going to pass a law next year and the year after that and the year after that, constantly responding to and evolving with what we're seeing on the ground.
I have to tell you, I was on H Street for the first time in kind of a long time recently, and I was really surprised about how many of the different businesses and storefronts are closed there. A lot of business owners say that they're closing up shop and leaving because of crime. Have you spoken to these former owners of these storefronts? And if so, what have they told you about the situation?
Yeah, I'm meeting with our businesses all the time. Now, what our H Street businesses, which we have a lot of really great businesses on H Street, Tom Seatsman, the Post, was just reviewing a lot of them. We have some really great spaces there. And the challenge is the city has not invested in H Street in the way that it has in other corridors. One of the things that I just passed through the budget right now is hundreds of thousands of dollars that are going to be going towards helping support our local businesses. A couple of years ago, one of the things they're facing is rising rents, significantly rising rents. One of the things that I did is help create a retail tax credit so that our businesses could afford to be in their buildings better. I'm pushing to see that double because I think our businesses are struggling as landlords and owners keep jacking up the prices. And so those rents just keep going up. The businesses I know are committed to their corridors. They're doing great work. And what they want is a city that gives them some more help so they can thrive and be able to be successful. We've worked on the public safety side. I mean, I've worked with MPD. We now have CCTV cameras on every intersection. We have dedicated patrols on H Street. And what MPD says is that the public safety concerns along the H Street corridor are very different than they were a year or two ago. But what they are seeing is these businesses need help. We're seeing a lot of the pandemic and federal relief that is phased out. And so they are really losing out on a lot of the business support that they used to have. And so the city has got to step up. And that's part of what I'm trying to do as the councilmember for this corridor or any others.
At one end of that corridor is Union Station. It's finally going to be renovated. It's going to cost $8.8 billion, take a decade.
Probably longer than that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It'd be like waiting on an Amtrak. I wouldn't. But so we like game this out, right? Because even though we in the media talk about crime as like the driving issue of the recall, you're a sitting councilman, and there's obviously a lot more factors in why you choose a councilman. So what's Union Station redevelopment and kind of building a neighborhood over there and stuff? What do you imagine that does to H Street and the kind of fabric of this neighborhood that you represent?
Well, it's going to be absolutely transformative, and I'm very excited about that. When you mentioned Union Station, though, and kind of tying it to H Street, it reminded me, though, of the Starbucks inside Union Station that closed and was more than happy to go out and try to tell people that it was because of crime. And I think it was the Washington Post that actually went and looked it up, and they'd had one bag of beans that had been stolen. And then it turned out the workers were about to unionize, and so that's why they shut down. But from a big picture for Union Station, we're about to have what is, I think, going to be not just a big project for Ward 6, not just a big project for DC, it's going to be a big project for the entire Mid-Atlantic region. Amtrak is going to be dramatically expanding their rail capacity so more people can come in and out of there. We're going to be rebuilding the H Street Bridge. That's what we call Hopscotch Bridge that goes over the tracks. We are going to be completely reimagining what Union Station looks like, both the front and the back. And then we have air rights projects that are going to go build, frankly, a whole small city right in that area. It's going to take, I don't think 10 years. I think it's going to take 20 years to see the full vision realized. But Union Station, this is not a once in a decade or even a once in a generation. This is about a once in a century type of revitalization and reimagining of what the nation station can be. And I'm really excited about it. And when you think about great cities, they have great transit. And Union Station is going to be the heart and the hub of it for DC.
I guess that's what brings me back to, I mean, look, Union Station's been so depressing for so long, right? During the pandemic and afterwards, like all these stores were closed. Like people who sort of followed what was going on might have known like this is because of a longer term redevelopment. But for a lot of people just getting off a train, they think, what's wrong with this city? Nothing, everything's empty. And you can have that feeling walking a lot of once vibrant commercial corridors in DC. If part of like building a mini city on top of Union Station and doing all this stuff to revive means convincing people, businesses, to take their life savings and put it into a new building or a lease or something like that, this is where I think that the perception of crime, at least, becomes another factor in the economy, because people think, oh, gee, I shouldn't invest there because who knows what might happen.
Michael, when's the last time you walked through Union Station?
A couple months ago.
Yeah, I mean, I walk through it every day to catch Metro. It is one of the largest number of people that walk through and enter one of the Metro stations. It is, with the new effort that's taking place with the Union Station Redevelopment Corporation, it is adding new retail, adding new options to it. We can't pretend that a pandemic didn't happen, though. The nature of transit, the nature of commutes changed dramatically. So the foot traffic during the pandemic absolutely decimated the retail that was in there. I don't know if you have followed as well, though, that a lot of those buildings have been caught up in the court for a very long time. And just a week or two ago, the court finally ruled for Amtrak in eminent domain because the company that was supposed to be managing all the retail of those spaces, which is a New York-based company, they basically walked away. And so we really are hitting essentially a refresh of the management and the ownership and the vision for Union Station. But Union Station is a space where thousands of folks are walking through it right now. It is a very active space, and we got to continue to build that. But to your point about, well, how does a business decide to take that risk? How does a business owner decide to take that life savings? You have to see a vision of where we want to go. If your vision is just treading water, then you're probably not going to invest your life savings in that space. The vision of Union Station is a transformed space. More people move through it than at an airport. It has that many people already today. It is the same equivalent to the number of people moving through BWI Airport, through Reagan. It is going to be phenomenal, but we have to also lay out what the vision looks like. And that is that we will have residences, we'll have offices, we'll have green space, we'll have parks. It is a radical transformation of what Union Station can and should be. And I think that's what's going to get people excited. And then to your point about having that small business owner want to gamble their life savings on taking a risk and opening a business, I think that by seeing the vision of what's going to be there, the investment that the city's going to make, the investment the federal government's going to make, the investment that private developers are going to make, I think that's what helps get people excited about it. I think WMATA's leadership right now is the best that we could have. I think Randy Clark's doing a fantastic job with WMATA. It's rebuilding confidence. Our bus ridership is already above pre-pandemic levels. Our rail ridership is catching back up. There's nothing but a bullish sentiment for Union Station and for WMATA right now.
So if a recall was approved, what is next for you? Like, would you try to run again, get the seat back? What would be next?
Oh, Bridget, I'm 100% confident. I'm the Ward 6 council member at the end of this. So that is not even a factor.
You're like, I reject the question even.
But that's what you feel from Ward 6. I mean, again, if you want to jump back to talking about this, I mean, Ward 6 is rallying incredibly strongly to push back on this because they see it for what it is. Ward 6 is 100% confident. I'm going to be the council member when this is over with, and it will be over. And part of the leadership that I have to provide is also bringing folks back together. So for the folks that were concerned, be able to bring them back and lead in a way. That's what my record is. That's the way that I've led as a council member in our city. And that's the way I'll continue to move forward. But that's what people expect. And that's why you see, again, why would you want to go up against Planned Parenthood and the Sierra Club and the firefighters? Like, they know how we have worked together to deliver results for Ward 6 and for our city over and over and over again. And that work is going to continue.
I'm curious, when you run into someone, I mean, because you're out all the time, when you run into someone who says, I'm going to support the recall, I just think it's time for a change, what do you say to them? I mean, and both in the here and now to try to get their vote back, but also for the long term to try to stitch it back together.
Well, I don't find somebody that says that very often. All the handful of times I can think that it's happened. One, I respect if they have a disagreement, right? I respect if somebody has a different interpretation, but I also talk to them about elections. And one of the things I hear pretty clearly, Ward 6 is an amazing place to live. Ward 6 is an amazing neighborhood to be able to call home. It's a great place to raise your family. It's a great place where your kids are going to get a great education because you can just walk them to school. It's a great place where you're going to have your parks and your spaces around you. It's a great place to go to Eastern Market or to H Street or to any other places that you've got here. It's a great place to grow old. Folks recognize that. And so when we talk about what an election means, it's the fact that I have delivered over and over again to help rebuild and modernize our schools, to help rebuild our libraries and our rec centers, to help make sure your kids have got the budget they need to hire the teachers they need, to make sure that we're working with our seniors, that there's senior services here. People are reminded of that pretty quickly and recognize what a great place this is to call home and the hard work that we've done to make it a place that everybody can call home. And that's the feedback I'm getting pretty much every day.
Hey, Charles, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you for being here. That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.